Fascinating stuff, isn't it? Now, last week we talked to Tanveer Ahmed about a High Court ruling in the UK that found children cannot change genders without their parents' consent. Seems reasonable. But in Australia, governments have stepped in to block parents from trying to stop gender reassignment treatment for their children. It's a very vexed issue, and one Tasmanian Liberal senator continues to focus on this, raising it in a speech in Parliament yesterday. She joined me earlier today. Senator Claire Chandler, thanks for joining us again. Your speech yesterday was so timely. We seem to have a very sensible approach to all this in the UK, but Australia's going in a different direction.
Yes, Chris, last week in the UK we saw their High Court hand down a judgment in the case of Kiera Bell. Now, Kiera Bell is a young woman who in her teenage years underwent medical transition took hormones and puberty blockers to transition to become male, later regretted that decision and took the Tavistock Clinic in the UK to the High Court, saying in effect that she didn't feel that she had been provided with all of the information regarding the treatment, and she didn't feel that she was able to consent. And indeed, the High Court upheld the fact that children are not able to understand the consequences of these life-altering treatments and raise serious questions about whether or not they can indeed consent to them. And so it's really timely that we're having this debate in the UK and talking openly about the best way to deal with young people that identifies the other gender. We call this gender dysphoria. But at the same time, in Australia, you see the Andrews government in Victoria pushing legislation through their parliament that will, in effect, make it an offence to talk about any medical treatment for children with gender dysphoria other than affirming their chosen gender. So it's really concerning when the UK High Court have said that this sort of treatment is experimental at best, to see a government in Australia, the Victorian government, saying, well, we think that that's the only option. Indeed, we're going to criminalise having any conversations with people about any other appropriate treatment.
It is such a worry. Now, anybody who's dealing with this condition and these ramifications, it is difficult. But the issue of consent and the age of consent is vital. The interest of the parents is vital. Obviously, the UK saying children can't decide this, can't give this consent on their own. But in Western Australia, we've had parents basically pushed aside by government and dealing with someone who's 15 years old and basically stopping the parents from having any role in this decision-making. And you're saying that's what's going to happen in Victoria under this legislation?
Well, that's certainly what it looks like on the face of it, Chris. This legislation has been put through the Victorian Parliament very quickly, and I don't think there has been appropriate public consultation so that we can tease out these ideas and determine whether or not these are some of the perverse outcomes of the legislation. But certainly I think it's the case. And I think it raises some serious questions about whether governments should be involving themselves in the rights of parents to look after their children.
Yeah, surely the age of consent might be 18 in this case. That's when we recognise people are adults, and it would seem a natural point from the social standpoint and the legal standing to have the age of consent. Can you tell us how many children, how many teenagers we expect that this would affect in this country each year?
Well, unfortunately, Chris, we don't really know the numbers of how many children are undergoing these gender treatments across the country, because that data isn't being collected. And I note that was something that the UK High Court highlighted in Kiera Bell's case that does need to happen, that we need to have a more complete picture of where these treatments are occurring and what outcomes are occurring as a result of them, whether or not other treatments are being considered, etc. So I think there's a lot of work to do in this space, particularly in Australia, particularly given what we found from the High Court in the UK last week.
Well, Senator, a lot of people are concerned about this. It's a difficult area to probe into. I know that you cop a lot of stick for doing so, but thanks for taking an interest in it and bringing our attention to some of these really complex issues of consent.
Thanks very much, Chris. I will continue to do so because, like you say, these are some serious concerns for a number of Australians.